What if I told you that you are already enlightened but nobody ever told you? What if everything you've been taught about enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism, all those years of practice, all those lifetimes of accumulation, all that striving towards some distant goal, was based on a fundamental misunderstanding? This isn't just provocative rhetoric. This is the radical teaching at the heart of the most profound traditions within Tibetan Buddhism. And today, we're going to explore what might be the biggest lie ever told about enlightenment. If you're ready to discover your true nature and understand the deepest teachings of the Tibetan masters, subscribe now and activate notifications so you never miss this transformative journey. For centuries, Tibetan Buddhism has been presented to the Western world as an elaborate system of practices, rituals, and stages that must be mastered over countless lifetimes before one can even glimpse enlightenment. We've been told stories of monks meditating in caves for decades, of practitioners completing hundreds of thousands of prostrations, of complex visualizations and initiations that seem designed to keep the goal forever out of reach. The popular image is one of enlightenment as the ultimate achievement, a state so exalted, so distant, so impossibly pure that ordinary beings like us couldn't possibly access it in this lifetime. But here's the radical truth that gets lost in translation, obscured by cultural misunderstanding, and sometimes deliberately hidden. The highest teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, particularly those found in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, tell us something completely different. They tell us that enlightenment is not something to be achieved in the future. It is not a goal to be reached after endless practice. Instead, these teachings proclaim that the very nature of your mind, right now, in this very moment, is already enlightened. This is not metaphor. This is the direct pointing out instruction that has been passed down through lineages of realized masters for over 1,000 years. The concept is called Buddha nature, or in Sanskrit, Tathagatagarbha, which literally means the womb or essence of the Buddha. This teaching asserts that every sentient being, without exception, possesses the complete nature of enlightenment within them already, not as a potential to be developed, but as the fundamental reality of what we already are. Think of it this way: the sun is always shining, always radiant, always present. When clouds cover the sky, we don't say the sun has disappeared or needs to be created. We simply recognize that temporary obscurations are blocking our view. The moment the clouds part, we see that the sun was there all along, unchanged, undiminished, complete. Your Buddha nature is exactly like this. It has never been absent. It has never been damaged. The only thing that has ever happened is that temporary obscurations, like clouds, have blocked your recognition of what you already are. And here's where the biggest lie comes in. For generations, both in the East and especially in the West, this teaching has been either completely hidden or so heavily qualified and surrounded with prerequisites that it becomes functionally inaccessible. We're told, yes, you have Buddha nature, but it's buried so deep under layers of karma and obscuration that you need to practice for lifetimes before you can even glimpse it. But the masters of Dzogchen and Mahamudra say something radically different. They say the recognition of your true nature is available right now. Not after you've completed 100,000 prostrations. Not after you've memorized scriptures. Right now. In this very moment. The great master Longchenpa taught that Dzogchen, the great perfection, is not a path of accumulation but a path of recognition. There is nothing to build, nothing to create, nothing to achieve. There is only the direct recognition of what has always been present. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche often spoke about spiritual materialism, the tendency to turn even the spiritual path into another project of the ego, another achievement to accumulate. He warned that the greatest obstacle to realization is often the spiritual path itself, when it becomes just another way of reinforcing the illusion of a separate self that needs to be improved, perfected, or transformed. The contemporary master Namkhai Norbu emphasized that Dzogchen is not separate from ordinary life. You don't need to retreat to a cave. You can recognize the nature of mind while driving a car, washing dishes, having a conversation, or sitting in traffic. Any moment, any state, any situation is an opportunity for recognition. So why has this teaching been hidden or obscured? In traditional Tibetan society, Buddhism was intricately woven with social hierarchy and political power. Maintaining the mystery and complexity of the path served institutional purposes. If everyone could recognize their Buddha nature directly, what would be the need for elaborate hierarchies or years of monastic training? Additionally, there's genuine concern about people misunderstanding the teaching. The worry is that students might hear this and think, if I'm already enlightened, I don't need to practice at all. This misunderstanding confuses relative and absolute truth. The teaching that your nature is already enlightened is absolutely true on the ultimate level, but on the relative level, recognition and stabilization of that nature require engagement and practice. It's like having a precious jewel buried in your backyard. The jewel is already there, complete and perfect, but until you dig it up, clean it off, and bring it into the light, its value remains unrealized in your life. The digging isn't creating the jewel, but it is necessary for you to actually benefit from what you already possess. When Tibetan Buddhism spread to the West, this nuanced understanding got lost. What arrived was often presented as a graduated path, heavily emphasizing preliminary practices and scholarly study. The direct teachings were kept as advanced teachings, reserved for students who had proven themselves through years of preliminary work. Western students, already conditioned by cultural emphasis on productivity and achievement, naturally interpreted Tibetan Buddhism through this lens. Enlightenment became the ultimate self-improvement project. Let's look deeper into what Dzogchen actually teaches. The word Dzogchen means great perfection or great completion. Perfection doesn't mean flawless. It means complete, whole, lacking nothing. Your fundamental nature, what Dzogchen calls Rigpa or primordial awareness, is already complete. It doesn't need to be improved. It simply needs to be recognized. Imagine you've been wearing sunglasses your entire life and forgotten you have them on. Everything you see is tinted, filtered, colored by the lenses. But the moment someone points out that you're wearing sunglasses and you take them off, you instantly recognize that the world was never actually that color. This is what the pointing out instruction in Dzogchen does. The master directly points to the nature of your mind, cutting through all conceptual elaboration, allowing you to recognize what was always there. This recognition is not intellectual. It's direct, non-conceptual knowing, like suddenly recognizing your own face in a mirror. The Dzogchen teachings describe this recognition using the Tibetan word Rigpa, sometimes translated as awareness or primordial knowing. Rigpa is the luminous, clear, unobstructed nature of consciousness itself before it gets caught up in thoughts, emotions, or stories. It's the knowing that knows, the awareness that's aware. When you recognize Rigpa, you recognize that this awareness has never been absent, never been obscured, never been anything other than perfectly complete. Modern neuroscience has begun to catch up with these ancient insights. Research with advanced Tibetan Buddhist practitioners has revealed remarkable findings. Studies led by neuroscientists like Richard Davidson have shown that long-term meditation practitioners display unprecedented levels of gamma-wave activity associated with heightened awareness and consciousness. These practitioners can generate and sustain these patterns at will, entering states of profound clarity on command. Brain imaging shows these contemplative states correspond to decreased activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with self-referential thinking. When this quiets, practitioners report dissolution of the sense of a separate self, an experience of pure awareness without ego. What's even more relevant is research showing these abilities aren't exclusive to people who've meditated for decades. Studies with short-term intensive retreats have shown significant neuroplastic changes, suggesting the brain's capacity for expanded awareness is far more accessible than traditional teaching suggested. Perhaps the obstacle isn't lack of time or effort, but simply lack of direct introduction to what's already present. This brings us to a fascinating paradox, the relationship between gradual and sudden paths. On one hand, you have systems like the Lamrim, presenting enlightenment as a systematic process spread across lifetimes. On the other, Dzogchen and Mahamudra point directly to the nature of mind and assert that recognition can happen instantaneously. So which is true? The answer is both. Think of the hero's journey. The hero faces trials, receives aid, undergoes transformation. But in the moment of greatest trial, there's often a sudden recognition, a flash of insight. The transformation, while prepared for by the entire journey, happens in an instant. The gradual path creates the conditions, but the recognition itself is sudden. The great masters taught that you need to practice as if enlightenment requires lifetimes of effort, while simultaneously recognizing that your nature is already complete. On the relative level, your habits are strong, your obscurations are thick. Practice is necessary. On the absolute level, your fundamental nature has never been confused, never been obscured. Both truths are simultaneously valid, and mature practice holds both without collapsing into either extreme. Let's bring this into everyday experience. If your Buddha nature is already present, how would you recognize it? Have you ever had a moment when your mind suddenly became very quiet, not from forcing, but spontaneously, maybe watching a sunset, holding a newborn baby, witnessing something deeply moving? In that moment, thoughts were suspended. The usual commentary shut off. There was just presence, awareness, being awake without thinking about being awake. That's a glimpse of Rigpa. Or perhaps you've experienced spontaneous compassion, helping someone without calculating, without constructing a story about being good. Just natural compassion, action without self-consciousness. That's Buddha nature expressing itself. These moments are much more common than we realize, but we've been taught to dismiss them as temporary states or insignificant experiences. The truth is, these are glimpses of your fundamental nature breaking through the clouds of habitual thinking. Dzogchen practice isn't about creating these experiences. It's about recognizing them when they arise, stabilizing the recognition, and eventually living from that recognition continuously. There's a practice in Dzogchen called non-meditation, recognizing that the ultimate nature of mind doesn't require modification or manipulation. You're not trying to achieve a special state. You're resting in awareness as it already is. When you're truly present with someone you love, really listening, not thinking about what to say next, not judging, just fully there, that quality of presence doesn't require effort in the usual sense. You're not forcing anything, but you are alert, engaged, alive. That's closer to the quality of non-meditation than sitting rigidly trying to empty your mind. The recognition practices often involve direct instructions like, look at the mind, rest in natural awareness, or recognize the one who is looking. When you look for the mind, you can't find an object. You find the looking itself, awareness recognizing itself, consciousness conscious of consciousness. Now let's address the elephant in the room. If all of this is true, why do we need practice at all? The recognition that your fundamental nature is enlightened doesn't mean that your current experience is enlightened. It doesn't mean your behaviors and patterns are expressions of wisdom. It means that underneath all the confusion and habitual patterns, your basic nature remains primordially pure. But that pure nature is currently clouded, like a diamond covered in mud. The psychological obstacles to recognizing Buddha nature are substantial. First is the ego's investment in maintaining itself. Your sense of being a separate self is so fundamental that the suggestion this self is illusory feels threatening. The ego reinterprets even these teachings through its own filter. Enlightenment becomes another thing for me to achieve, another credential, another way to feel special. This is spiritual materialism at its most subtle and dangerous. Another major obstacle is identification with thoughts and emotions. We don't just have thoughts, we are our thoughts. We don't experience anger, we are angry. This total identification obscures the recognition of consciousness itself. It's like being so absorbed in a movie that you forget you're sitting in a theater. Most people spend their entire lives lost in the movie, never recognizing the screen, never recognizing the awareness that's witnessing the whole show. Buddhist practice offers countless methods for working with these obstacles. Mindfulness practices help you create space between awareness and the objects of awareness. You begin to notice I'm having an angry thought rather than I am angry. This simple shift is revolutionary, but even these practices can become obstacles if approached as techniques for achieving enlightenment, rather than methods for recognizing what's already present. This is the great paradox. You must practice diligently while simultaneously understanding that practice isn't creating anything new. You're not building enlightenment, you're revealing it. So what would it look like to live from the recognition of your Buddha nature? It's about a fundamental shift in identity. Instead of being the central character in the drama of your life, you recognize yourself as the space in which all experience arises. Thoughts still come and go. Emotions still arise and pass. But there's recognition that none of this touches the fundamental awareness witnessing it all. This recognition brings natural compassion. When you recognize that boundaries between self and other are conceptual constructs, the suffering of others is felt more directly, motivating natural, spontaneous response. Living from Buddha nature also brings uncontrived ease. Not that everything becomes easy, but there's a fundamental okayness with whatever arises. Not resignation, but deep trust in the fundamental nature of reality. There's a Dzogchen teaching about being like a lion that's not frightened by its own roar. Most people are like dogs that bark, and then get scared by their own barking. We create dramas, get caught in our stories, then suffer from them. The person who recognizes Buddha nature is like the lion, fully expressing, fully engaged, but not frightened or confused by their own expressions. This creates tremendous freedom. You can feel anger without being controlled by it. You can experience fear without being paralyzed. You can have thoughts without believing all of them. But let's be clear about something crucial. This recognition doesn't happen once, and you're done. The Tibetan tradition talks about different levels of realization, from initial glimpse to full stabilization. The initial recognition might happen in an instant, but stabilizing that recognition, learning to rest in it continuously, integrating it into all circumstances, this is the work of a lifetime. The recognition is sudden, but the stabilization is gradual. The seeing is immediate, but the transformation of habits takes time. One beautiful aspect of Dzogchen and Mahamudra is their emphasis on integrating practice with daily life. You don't need to be in formal meditation to practice. You can recognize the nature of mind while walking, talking, or working. Masters taught that the test of authentic practice isn't what happens on the meditation cushion, but how you are in the midst of life's challenges. Can you recognize awareness when you're angry? Can you rest in natural presence when you're anxious? This is the real practice, available in every moment. Contemporary teachers have developed various methods for moment-to-moment practice. Some teach noting, simply noting whatever arises without judgment. Others teach dropping or releasing, where whenever you notice you've become contracted, you simply drop the story and return to open awareness. Still others emphasize inquiry, constantly asking, who is aware of this? These questions aren't meant to be answered intellectually. They turn attention back to its source, to the awareness that's aware. The beautiful thing is their simplicity. You don't need special equipment or locations. You just need willingness to turn attention toward awareness itself again and again. What's becoming increasingly clear is that the teaching of Buddha nature is not peripheral, but absolutely central to Buddhism. It's found throughout Mahayana Buddhism in the Tathagatagarbha Sutras. It's implicit in the Heart Sutra's teaching that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. It's present in the Lotus Sutra's declaration that all beings will become Buddhas. This isn't a secret teaching reserved for advanced practitioners. It's the fundamental truth that all elaborate systems and practices are pointing toward. So here's the radical invitation. What if you stopped seeking enlightenment right now? What if you stopped trying to improve yourself spiritually? Not because those qualities aren't worth cultivating, but because the one trying to cultivate them is precisely the illusion that needs to be seen through. The ego co-opts even the spiritual path. The direct path teachings invite something radically different, not self-improvement but self-recognition. Not becoming better but recognizing what you already are. Not achieving enlightenment but awakening to the enlightenment that's never been absent. This is deeply challenging for Western minds conditioned by achievement and productivity. We want to know, what do I need to do? And the answer keeps coming back, nothing. Because there's no distance between where you are and where you think you need to go. This isn't nihilism. It's recognizing that the ground of practice is already complete. You're not practicing to become enlightened. You're practicing to recognize and stabilize the enlightenment that's your fundamental nature. This shift in orientation changes everything. Living from this recognition doesn't mean you become passive. If anything, you become more engaged because you're not filtering everything through the lens of, How does this affect me? When there's loosening of identification with a separate self, compassion arises more naturally, action becomes more appropriate, creativity flows more freely, relationships deepen. This is enlightened activity, not superhuman powers, but simply action that flows from recognition of your true nature. The teachings on Buddha nature also offer profound response to nihilism and despair. In an age of crisis and anxiety, the recognition that your fundamental nature is pure and complete is not escapism, but a profound source of resilience. You're rooted in something deeper than circumstances. You can fully acknowledge suffering, work to alleviate it, feel appropriate concern, while simultaneously recognizing an unconditional dimension that circumstances can't touch. This paradox that mature practice embodies, full engagement with relative reality and simultaneous recognition of absolute reality, is the mark of genuine realization. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly felt completely okay with everything exactly as it is? Not because everything was perfect externally, but because there was a deep sense of rightness, of trust, that at the deepest level, all is well. That's not a special state you achieved. That's your fundamental nature briefly recognized. That okayness isn't dependent on conditions. It's the nature of awareness itself, which is inherently at peace, inherently complete, inherently free. The lie isn't that enlightenment exists. The lie is that it's somewhere else, something other than what you already are. The lie is that you need to become someone different, accumulate enough good karma, complete enough practices before you're worthy of recognizing your true nature. The truth is, you're already worthy. You've always been worthy. Worthiness isn't something you earn, it's what you are. The preliminary practices of Tibetan Buddhism aren't meaningless rituals. They're skillful means for working with obstacles, creating conducive conditions. But they're means, not ends. They're pointing toward recognition, not creating enlightenment from scratch. The danger is mistaking the means for the end, getting so caught up in accumulating practices that you miss what they're pointing toward. The building, your Buddha nature, is already complete. The scaffolding of practices is there to help you see what's already present, not to construct something new. So what's the practical application? First, check your motivation. Are you trying to achieve something or simply resting in awareness as it already is? Second, practice recognizing awareness throughout your day. Notice not just experiences, but the awareness experiencing. Third, work with obstacles skillfully, but don't make them solid. They're temporary, like clouds. Fourth, find authentic guidance. These teachings can be easily misunderstood. And fifth, embody the recognition in your life. The test is how you are in the world. Let me be very direct. You don't need another practice, another teaching, another initiation. You might benefit from those things, but fundamentally you don't need them because you already have everything necessary for complete enlightenment right now. The awareness experiencing these words right now, that's it. That's Buddha nature. Not the thoughts about these words, but the bare awareness that's aware of all of it. That awareness has never been confused. It's never needed improvement. It's been here all along, patiently waiting for recognition, like the sun behind clouds. The biggest lie about enlightenment isn't found in any text. It's the lie we tell ourselves, that we're not ready, not good enough, not practiced enough to recognize our true nature right now. This lie masquerades as humility, but it's the final defense of the ego against its own dissolution. Every moment you spend believing you need to become something other than what you are is a moment spent reinforcing the very illusion the teaching is pointing beyond. This isn't about arrogance. It's about stopping the violence we do to ourselves through constant self-judgment. It's about finally radically accepting that you are already accepted, already complete, already home. The Tibetan masters who teach Dzogchen and Mahamudra aren't offering you a path to enlightenment. They're offering you recognition of enlightenment. They're not giving you something new. They're pointing out what you've always had but never noticed. The spiritual path isn't a journey away from where you are toward somewhere else. It's waking up to where you've always been. The solution is so simple, so immediate, so obvious that we constantly overlook it, searching for something more complicated. We're like someone searching for their glasses while wearing them. The searching itself prevents finding because what you're searching for is what's searching. When the searching stops, recognition happens by itself. So here's my invitation. Right now, without changing anything, simply notice that you are aware. Notice the awareness experiencing this moment. That awareness, prior to all content, prior to all thought, that is your Buddha nature. It's the most ordinary thing there is, so ordinary we constantly overlook it. But it's also the most precious thing because it's what you fundamentally are. Everything else arises in this awareness like waves on the ocean. The waves come and go. The ocean remains. You are not the waves. You are the ocean. This recognition doesn't solve all your problems. You'll still face challenges. But there's a fundamental shift in relationship to all of it. Instead of being trapped in the drama, you recognize yourself as the space in which the drama unfolds. Life becomes lighter, more playful, less desperately serious. Not because you don't care, but because you're rooted in something deeper. This is the freedom Buddha nature offers. Not freedom from life, but freedom within life. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition, with all its elaborate practices and profound philosophy, is ultimately pointing to this simple recognition. Everything else is skillful means, fingers pointing at the moon. The building itself is your own awareness, always present, always complete, always free. The lie is that you need to do anything more than recognize what's already here. The truth is that recognition is enough. This is what the great masters are pointing to. They're not giving you something new. They're pointing to what you've always been but never noticed. And once seen, everything changes. So if you've been seeking enlightenment somewhere in the future, what if you stopped seeking and started recognizing? What if the enlightenment you're seeking is the awareness that's seeking? What if the journey ends when you recognize you never left home? This is the invitation, not to abandon practice but to understand its true purpose. Not to stop studying but to remember that study points toward direct experience. The biggest lie about enlightenment is that it's not already here. Already you. Already complete. The biggest truth is that it always has been, and recognizing this changes everything. Have you experienced moments of pure awareness where the separate self dissolved? Share your experience in the comments. If this video has opened something for you, subscribe to continue this journey of recognition together. And if someone you know is stuck in endless seeking, share this video. They might need this reminder that what they're seeking is closer than close. Because ultimately, there's only one thing worth sharing: the recognition that we are all expressions of the same awakened awareness, and that recognition is the end of seeking and the beginning of living as what we've always been. Thank you for being present with these teachings. May all beings recognize their true nature. May all beings be free.